Aloha, beautiful fam. Just being shown something really cool about self-sustaining, self-regulating, self-generating, and flying our lightship Merkabas. So, I was pondering my partnership, my long-time relationship with the man that I was married to, and I was curious what his human design chart looked like. I probably printed it off long ago and didn't have the grasp of the system that I do in this miracle. So I was pondering it, and from the place of Western astrology, I knew that our charts did not really match, and that what it had said was that it would take great love for this partnership to overcome its tremendous differences. And that's what we had. Great love. And so we seem to navigate a lot, and it seemed quite easeful because there was so much love. And then the guidance showed something so cool about us being walking movie houses, which I've shared many times before, with our reality coming up the script inside of our DNA, and our reality rising up through the pineal and then reflecting onto the blackness of space, a movie that we engage with. And the guidance showed, again, the I Ching clock, which is inside of us all. And there's that expression that there is a time for every season. And so the piece about us, that resistance is futile when we know that it's time to move on from something. I'm using a lot of time words here. We know that it's time to move on from something. It's not fulfilling anymore. If we understood something very special I'm being shown, it would be simple for us to do, but it is that emotional attachment that was programmed into us to hang on. So, as things have increased, this is really amazing. So, The 9 Waves of Consciousness, the book by Carl Kalleman, speaks about vibrational frequencies, and that each wave had a certain oscillation. So I was speaking about the 41 hertz yesterday in a transmission with Elawan. So for a recap on frequency, frequency is a wave. So, when you see drawings of frequencies, you see electrical information, for example. There's a wave, and it has an oscillation. So the oscillation has to do with the length of the line of the wave from the top to the bottom. So it's easy to understand if you apply it to surfing. If you're a surfer, you get up in the morning, the first thing you do is you turn on the surf report. And the surf report says, today it's 10-foot north shore, 10-foot swell, blah, blah, blah. What does 10-foot swell mean? It means from the peak to the trough, from the bottom to the top of the wave and back down, it's 10 feet. Not in back down, on both sides, I should say. So from the peak to the trough, the wave is a 10-foot face. So this is the same with vibration. There is a length from the top to the bottom in the blackness of space. And so the length between the top and the bottom creates an experience of time. And the book of 9 Waves of Consciousness by Carl Kellerman shows that we're in a holographic reality and that it started 16.4 billion years ago. And he shows the length or oscillation of the wave back then was like something like, whatever, let me guess, 222 million years was one oscillation of the wave, and maybe the peak and the trough was I don't know, let's say 100 million, we could say feet in length, just for the sake of using a distance measurement. So basically what he was saying in the book is that these are very large frequencies in space. They are long, they are big, they are spread out. And actually, the better way to describe it would be that, it's just really long and spread out. So if we looked at the ocean, when they give the swell report, they tell the distance and the speed. They'll say 10 feet, 22 seconds. And what they mean is that 10-foot waves are coming in every 22 seconds. So the distance and or the swell report gives you that information, so then you have a sense of what the kind of day is. It's kind of a mellow day. They're 10 foot, but they're 22 seconds apart versus some days they may say the swell. One year I was in Kauai for the winter, and for 6 to 8 weeks there was a 50-foot swell every week. A huge wave. All of the beaches were being completely washed out, and the surfers who were going out were, of course, only the best of the best to ride these massive waves. And most of them did tow in on jet skis because they did not have the capacity to paddle onto waves like that. But my cool friend, one of my cool young Hawaiian friends, he and his buddy went out and they paddled onto these massive swells. Woo! Hawaiian. So, and I got to see it from a viewpoint above. Back to what the guidance is showing about the I Ching and all of this. So, the earliest waves. So we as a consciousness have been able to experience everything from being an amoeba to an insect to a reptile to a bird to a stone. Like, we have experienced it all. We've experienced all these different flesh suits over time. That is a common theory, and that is the theory that was shared with me by a very specific elder who said, flick the switch. So the waves of the first cycle of consciousness were very long and big, but the distance between the waves would be the 222 million years sort of thing. So a peak and a trough would only occur over what was a very long period of time. So in the blackness of space, this long extended wave created an experience of massive recycling of what we would call reincarnation, life and death, of all these little single-celled organisms being birthed and dying and being birthed again, so that the consciousness could expand and learn over this very expanded period of time in simple little flesh suits called single-celled organisms, which, as above, so below, their little Merkaba was exactly the same. The consciousness within the Merkaba is what has been expanding and learning over time, and then new things come into the Merkaba with each shift of the wave to experience the reality in a new and unique way. So as we climb up the ladder of consciousness to the second wave and the third wave, and the pictures in the book help to understand a lot of this, the waves become faster and there's less time in between the waves. And so the recycle time, or the time from going to the peak to the trough, is faster. But of course, the second wave, still hundreds of thousands of years between waves, and so on. Or at least that's the experience in the thing called time. As we began to leap through the 7th, 8th, and 9th waves, so we have all who are alive now experienced, I would say, all three. Possibly some of the younger generation, so to speak, didn't experience the 7th. And I could check the times in the book, but it's not necessary. So we've been through the 7th, 8th, and 9th waves, and all the other waves are still present in the field of consciousness, but not active. Each wave has a different expression. Each wave affects a different quadrant of the body, the earth, and the brain. So the whole brain was not online in the way that it came online when the 9th wave activated on the 11th of March or 9th of March, 2011, 9th of March. That's when the tsunami wave occurred in Japan. And the I Ching is a clock embedded inside of the machinery of the human, of the solar plexus, as the guidance showed. And now we're getting the upgrade, and so that's why my solar plexus turned into a sun, and I was unlocked from the 2-strand DNA. So while the clock, this is why we want to get the Kundalini up to the top of the head and keep it there. Because when we do that simple practice and choose whole brain state, we are aligning with the 9th wave of consciousness called unity. It's a choice because all the waves are now online simultaneous, and one can choose what consciousness they are residing in by where they place their energetic focus. So if one does not have the Kundalini at the top of the head and is not in whole brain state, then they are residing in other levels of consciousness merely by the choice of where we hold our vibration. It's effortless. All we have to choose is the vibration, and then the rest is alignment with. So the 9th wave of consciousness is a whole brain state. And as we are sharing in the mechanics that are in the love streams, whole brain state is occurs when the Kundalini is connected between the root chakra and the crown of the body, and the two kind of go hand in hand. So whole brain state helps the Kundalini to stay up, and rising the Kundalini up through all the tools that we have and keeping it up is also part of it. So they go hand in hand, as I've shared in the love streams. Now, Once the Kundalini remains up, keeping in mind that the 2-strand is in the solar plexus, and in the 8th wave of reality and past ones, survival of the fittest was key. And that's because basically what the 9 ways of consciousness are showing us is that unless one was an adept or had dedicated their life to being awakened or in unity consciousness, or they were of the few peoples of the earth who exist that way, then it would require a deep practice to maintain the 9th wave of consciousness, because the inertia of the collective was not in that wave. So an individual, in order to be in the wave of unity consciousness, would require tremendous perfection and practice to stay there, because we're all connected, and the collective was not in that level of consciousness. So one who wanted to break free of the inertia would it would be required for them to make it their life practice. Once we came into the 9th wave, now it's simply a choice of where we place our focus and how we choose our vibration. And of course, this is in all the Gnostic wisdom. It says right in the Star Knowledge bundles that the key is vibration, choosing our vibration. So if you think about being in the lower chakras, the lower 3, if the 2-strand DNA program and the 64 codons of the I Ching are held in the solar plexus, then rising the Kundalini and keeping it up, then what happens? We are transcendent of 2-strand DNA. So this piece about our personality and our blueprint and everything we knew ourselves to be is held at the level of the solar plexus. And when we choose to maintain our frequency beyond the solar plexus, then we are in a whole new discovery. And the part about us slipping backwards into the old self is just familiarity. That's the ledge that our consciousness might fall back to, which is why it falls back to dualistic programs and relationships that are polarized, that create an emotional frequency or an emotional wave, an emotional experience. Happy, sad, roller coaster. Miss Elawan and I took notes from the transmission yesterday to shortcut the consciousness to help it understand the process of the roller coaster and stilling the wave. Simply to still the wave, rise the Kundalini beyond the solar plexus, in through the heart, through the throat, through the amygdala, through the pineal, and all those workings to the crown and beyond. And then there's no thinking going on. There's no figuring it out. How do I liberate myself? Because we are now in the vibration of unity, multi-D, and the great I Am is navigating the avatar we are in. So there is no thinking or figuring it out. We are now sovereign and one with Source. Simple. So this is why, again, meditation. Each miracle is very significant. And when I say each miracle, I mean walking meditation. And to get there, practice meditation and use those wonderful 5-minute meditations of Kelly Howells. If one is still in time and feeling they don't have the time to do hour-long meditations and so on, then do 2-minute ones. To continue to bring oneself back into the higher state, to have the Kundalini stay up. In fact, just cross the ankles, cross the wrists, or do the butterfly hug for a few miracles. And one is back in the meditation. One is back in the whole brain state. This is why we just be persistent with it, because It rises and keeps the Kundalini beyond through practice, like practicing lifting a dumbbell weight. Eventually the muscle becomes strong, the Kundalini becomes strong. The serpent at the coiled at the base of the spine is now risen up to meet the dove. The lovers have unified in the head. And beautiful things begin to happen because now we are one. Thine eye is one because the energies have met of the opposites, the yin and the yang, the black and the white. They're unified. And then the Kundalini can begin to circulate. It moves on its own, the cerebral spinal fluid, through the body, circulating within us. This is chrysalis. When it begins to circulate naturally on its own prime frequency, 1111 is key. And that has to do with hertz and a wave of consciousness that begins to activate the flesh suit to higher ascension. So the wonderful piece about the I Ching and the holographic reality beyond us, or outside of us, so to speak, the I Ching is in the solar plexus, and that is as high as our Kundalini is rising. And for some people it doesn't even get there, because remember, solar plexus is will. So if we are lost in lower vibrational emotions, as the chart of power versus force shows, certain emotions are of lower frequencies and certain emotions are of higher frequencies. And all this means is, based on the frequency that we are choosing, we will have certain experiences of emotions, and we will have certain experiences of chakras. If we're in the root, survival. If we're in the sacral, in the lower frequencies, it has become also survival, which is to mate and reproduce the species. These are all based in fear at this level. An amazing, beautiful man named Amit Goswami, who was in What the Bleep Do We Know, this wonderful physicist, gorgeous little being. He is a gorgeous little being. I met him. And he did this wonderful, I heard him do a presentation on the quantum physics of lovemaking. And he showed that if one is in the lower three chakras, when engaging intimately with another, it's actually activating entropy in the body, death chemistry. The body is decaying from the engagement and the interaction, because the chemistry that is being released from that level of engagement is telling the body to decay. So then he showed that when the Kundalini is risen up into the heart chakra, and engagement intimately is occurring from this place, then it actually activates the fountain of youth. It activates chemistry in the body, which begins to activate genesis, or restoration of the body. And does one have to engage in intimacy with another for all of this? No, not at all. It's just he was making a point about it, that most of the world was engaging intimately at a level of survival, which was actually creating decay, because survival and its opposite is non-survival. So it was a fascinating scientific view of biology and physics and all of it, and the particle and the wave and vibrational frequency. So if the 64 codons and the I Ching is held in the solar plexus, then how do we activate our triple helix and give our double helix of creation duality back? It's simple. Keep the Kundalini above the solar plexus into the heart and beyond. And the process will happen naturally to begin to have new experiences of synchronicity and alignment with Source, moving us into, as it rises to the top of the head, the crown, and beyond, unity consciousness, ninth wave multi-D. So, the piece about the I Ching, it's a holographic insert or part of the structure of the solar plexus chakra. And if the Kundalini is remaining in the solar plexus or lower, that's why the solar plexus is related to will, because the will is to transcend duality. We have to come to that place through the experiences in the lower three chakras to make that choice, to find our will, to go beyond it, to go beyond separation. Once we find our will to do this, then it is the stilling of the wave to have the Kundalini rise higher. We have to slow down and get present so the Kundalini will rise up and stay up. In lower nature intimacy, the Kundalini rises up in something called an orgasm, and it doesn't stay up. It's just like one of those things you used to see at the fairs, the big, heavy, the strong man thing, where the strong man grabs a big mallet and he swings it on a little metal thing resting on the ground, and a bell rises up, and if he's strong enough, it hits the top. A lot of people's Kundalini and orgasm doesn't even reach the pineal and all those working parts. That's the lower nature entropy chemistry that Amit Goswami was speaking of. So, we can practice all these beautiful things within ourselves and rising that Kundalini up. And for most, this is the best practice, so they don't become attached to the thing outside of themselves, which happens in the lower chakra intimate engagement. People become attached because the sensation that they have of activating their Merkaba is attached to something outside of the self, which isn't real and doesn't exist, at least not in the way of forever that we become attached to. In my creation, all beings are whole. Meaning all systems in order, in their fullest capacity of activation. I consent to this. When the Kundalini was in the lower three chakras, the 64 codons which sit in the solar plexus according to the guidance became the holographic component that the light of the Kundalini would shine out of. So the pineal, our human eyes, which are seeing the world around us, or were before our first eye was active, our human eyes would see what was being reflected out from the I Ching solar plexus of duality based on how high we were rising our vibration to the solar plexus or lower. And so every character in our story was based on the I Ching clock, where the sun was circulating through it, tick-tock, throughout the seasons, activating all the different genes And those are the characters that were showing up in front of us, as well as what we were experiencing within ourselves. So same. Why is my husband so wonderful today? And this week he's so obnoxious. Well, that is because the different aspects of the self are experiencing their own blueprint in relation to others, other genes, other gene keys. So it is a symphony going on of experiences. And if we understand the mechanics, what is being reflected outside of us is actually our own inner process and relationship with that component called the 64 codons and something called a sun passing through it like a clock. It's just like a grandfather clock. All the wheels turn. These are the mechanics within us. So each circulation around the clock, we have an opportunity to make a leap beyond the clock, out of the mechanic, to free the spirit, as Joe says, free the mind back into the field, out of the body, out of the mechanics of the flesh suit that have specific programs. That's why we have to learn to break the habit of being ourselves when we're in the lower nature. We have to do things that make us uncomfortable, test the body, go beyond the comfort zone, to uplift the spirit beyond the mechanics of the flesh. Because the flesh at that level is mechanical and it's programmed for survival. It's like a bunch of little machines walking around. So the goal inside of the machine, the flesh suit, the avatar, is to get in and then activate the mechanics beyond the survival component placed in the flesh. To create the limitation, the survival component is there to create the limitation so that there is pressure, a time is ticking kind of thing, for the spirit to awaken before the machine or the clock in the machine runs out. So holding on to things outside of us is senseless, because there is a time for every season under the sun. Oh my goodness, look at that expression. Under the sun. The sun is the solar plexus. That's where the sun activated within me and I turned into a star. There is a time for every season under the sun. Meaning, once the Kundalini rises up beyond the sun, there is no time. When we move into the heart, we know this. When we're in love, our heart is activated, our serotonin, all those higher things. There is no time. There is no time when we are with our lover or beloved. It's just timeless. Time goes by in an instant. And then when we're not with the beloved, time goes by so slow while we think about the next time we see them, because now the Kundalini is back under the sun, where everything has a season, a time for every season. When we get beyond the solar plexus and activate the higher mechanics of our flesh, there is no time. And now the experience is from the place of the activated serotonin, which is love. Complete difference. So, back to pondering the marriage and union with who was once titled my husband, and pondering his human design. What the guidance was showing was that literally in the lower three chakras when we have needs and wants, which is where they reside, particularly in the sacral desire. Then, as our energy travels through the I Ching clock, if we can get our Kundalini high enough to the will center of the solar plexus, we can begin to activate our desires, all based on a clock, which is how astrologers go, no, you don't have anyone coming into your life until this time, and then maybe there's a good potential. Because they're reading clocks, they're reading mechanics of the flesh suit. And how do we overcome the clock and go beyond it? By rising the Kundalini beyond the lower three and keeping it up there. And then we discover, once it moves into the heart, we're no longer creating from survival desire. Survival desire is about survival programs, and that's how we choose our mates. In fact, the guidance is showing we create them. We create them by activating certain aspects of the I Ching as though we were playing that strongman game at the carnival or the fair and swinging the big heavy mallet. We get our Kundalini up to the will center enough to communicate our desires from the sacral, and then the will center is where the I Ching resides. And if we hit this little object strong enough, the Kundalini rises into the sacral to activate the 64 codons to create an archetype outside of us to answer our desires. Through our will, we create it. So then, those desires based in survival create holographic experiences with others based on the coordinates of the 64 codons that we activated to create this. Hence, there was a lot of love in the relationship with my longtime partner, and we had very different blueprints that did not fit together. And there must have been incredible love, and the love remained beyond the solar plexus in the heart once it was created. Desire nature, as Richard says, is not bad. Desire nature is what helps us to get the Kundalini up and then not to get addicted to the desires and what manifested through those desires, hence the non-attachment. Once the desire is fulfilled, because the desire being fulfilled is never fulfilled in the way that we expect it. It's fulfilled in the way we most need it to be fulfilled in order to receive the polar reflection, to navigate and learn more stillness. That's why opposites attract, to create the polarity for reflection, for contemplation. Contemplation is part of higher consciousness. So we contemplate our creations rather than judge them and fight them, which is part of the survival lower nature. So we start to go, I'm tired of fighting, I'm tired of crying, I'm tired of being mad, I'm tired of the roller coaster. So move into contemplation and more meditation. Keeping in mind, meditation doesn't mean sitting in a bedroom for hours a day. If we have other things to navigate also, meditation can be and is a living practice that we learn whole brain state is the 1-minute meditation or less. Kelly Howell's is the lovely 5-minute meditation. So we contemplate our creation. And as we do, we become friends with it because it's showing us how to navigate beyond the lower 3 chakras. Aho.